Hi guys, welcome back to Endstep, the Upkeep Aftershow. We just played a Tiny Leaders game, so kind of like Commander, except Tiny Leaders is designed to be a 1v1 format, faster format. Decks are cut in half, no cards with 4 or more converted mana cost. It's a fun variant. This was our first episode where we played something that wasn't technically Commander. So if you haven't let us know already, let us know what you think of the format just in general.
And do you want to see more formats like that aren't technically Commander?
Yeah, there are other Commander variants. I think we want to keep it in the Commander adjacent general ballpark for the series, but there are other Commander variants. So yeah, let us know that for sure. I feel like everyone's deck kind of got to do a little bit of what they wanted to do. My first question for the day is, what do you think about the format? This format specifically, Tiny Leaders, and then other formats that are similar, like Commander variants. Preston, why don't you start us off?
I really have liked Tiny Leaders. We haven't done a ton of it so far within our group, but we've had a couple games, and I think it's a really fun sort of idea because Commander is my favorite format because I like the Commander aspect specifically. So still having that being there, just with the 3 or less CMC restriction, I think it's a fun little change.
Yeah. What about you, Jason? What do you think about Tiny Leaders? Or are there other Commander-like variants that you would maybe like to try sometime?
You know, as far as that, I can't think of any right now. I'm a big fan of Tiny Leaders. I don't prefer it over Commander, but what I like about it is, like, let's say you have a group of, like 4 to 6 people, and you have a Commander game going and 2 people get knocked out. The rest of that game might take an hour and a half, kind of depending on what's going on. And so the people that got knocked out, instead of just sitting there watching, other people play, you could just get a Tiny Leaders game going, 1v1, and have your own separate game going for that. It's also nice because, you're probably... there's obviously really good, really expensive cards at this CMC. But I think it's pretty easy to build a Tiny Leaders deck on a budget. The cards that we play are not super expensive, with the exception of, maybe a few.
Well, and it helps too that like a 50-card deck is probably just going to be cheaper than a 100-card deck, So that's a big part of it.
And I would say, a good amount of people who are new to Magic start out in formats with 40-card decks, 60-card decks, something like that. So 50 it's a lot more manageable of a number to build a deck around as opposed to just jumping right into Magic the Gathering, having to build a deck with 99 cards in it.
And I agree with your sentiment of having something to do when the normal game of Commander is still going. That's why I proxied up a bunch of modern decks for that reason, so that if we get knocked out, we have some 1v1 games that we can play. And Modern's actually my favorite format, so it's a shame that I don't really ever get to play it hardly ever. But
you ever in a 6-player game and you and another person get eliminated, and now you're just watching a 4-player game that's going to take 3.5 hours?
Yeah, now you got something to do.
Now you got something to do, exactly.
We did actually think about, Preston asked me this before we started filming. I did think originally maybe we do this the way you're supposed to play Tiny Leaders, which is 1v1. So we could have Jason and I could play against each other, and then Steven and Preston could play against each other, and then the 2 winners play against each other. But I feel like that veered too far off from actual Commander that I didn't want to do it for this episode. But Steven,
let us know if you're fine seeing that.
Yeah, Steven and I have one 1v1 game that's up on the channel already, and that was fun to do. I would definitely be willing to do more stuff like that, or even have a tournament bracket style thing.
Tiny Leaders tournament.
I think that would be fun. So yeah, if that's something you guys would be willing to watch, let us know. Steven, what do you think about Tiny Leaders, and do you know of other formats? I know Canadian Highlander is really cool. Are there other Commander variants that you think you might want to try, or what do you just think about Tiny Leaders?
What?
Yeah, it's kind of like Commander, but there's also a spell in your command zone.
Oh, I did not know about that.
Yeah.
Why is it called Canadian Highlander?
I don't know, because the Canadians made it up.
Well, it existed first. In Highlander, there can only be 1. So that's where the only one of each copy comes from.
But what do you think about
to answer your question, I do think it is better to mix up Commander a little bit more. And just having more restrictions has to let you play a different way than you might be comfortable with.
I agree.
Also, nothing in your deck's going to be broken.
Card draw is not as important in this format.
Ramp is definitely not as important.
Yeah. Board wipes hardly exists except for,
Cyclonic Rift and Toxic
Which,
Deluge.
thank God, he did
I
not
mean,
play.
on turn 3, if you have a land drop every turn, being able to cast every single spell in your deck, it's nice having that access.
Yeah, I almost didn't even add Rampant Growth to my deck because I was like, what's the point? But what are a couple of your guys' favorite cards in your deck that you didn't get to show off? Preston, start us off.
The fun cards I have are these 2 creatures. I have a Shimmer Mirror, which lets me cast artifacts as though they had flash, so, I can be a little tricksy. Someone thinks they're about to take out my commander with a kill spell that hits it for a certain amount of power or something, and I make it bigger with an artifact creature at instant speed or something like that. And then Apocryphite, it's an artifact creature construct. It's a 1/1. And it has this cool thing where whenever it dies, it goes into exile with 3 time counters on it. So in 3 turns, I cast it again, and it comes in the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Which means if it ever dies, it'll eventually come back, make my commander bigger, die again, keep coming back. So every few turns, I'll be able to at least sometimes get my commander, a creature played. And then I didn't get any of my card draw spells. Garruk's Uprising, Elemental Bond, and the best one, Lifecrafter's Bestiary. Card draw's not as important, but you guys were all drawing cards, and I just really wasn't hitting anything to do that, so I was top decking most of the game.
What about you, Jason? What are a couple cards that... Because so you and Steven both did a thing where you guys just took commander decks that you have and cut them in half. So this is a Tovolar deck that you actually have. And you just basically cut it in half, but I thought that was interesting.
That was really easy to do because the majority of werewolves and wolves that I have in this deck were 3 CMC or less anyway. Take out all the big stuff and then filter through the 3 CMC
Make sure
or
you
less
only
cards.
have the best of the best.
Yeah.
So, but what are a couple of your favorites that you didn't get to showcase in the game?
Normally when I run this deck, it's supposed to win the same way that it wins as a Tiny Leaders deck, where I just swing out with a bunch of creatures and deal as much damage as possible. It's a little bit more effective at doing that as a commander deck as opposed to a Tiny Leaders deck, but it still does pretty well. My favorite combinations are Pyreheart Wolf, you saw in the game, but it does a similar effect as Goblin War Drum. So Goblin War Drums is creatures you control have menace. And then Familiar Ground is a really good card. It says each creature you control cannot be blocked by more than 1 creature. So with a Menace Enabler,
So they can't be blocked.
They basically can't be blocked. And what's nice about Tiny Leaders is if later in the game I have access to, all this different mana, I would also need a Haste Enabler, something I'm going to add to my Tiny Leaders deck. Play all these creatures, they all have haste, and then I can swing with all of them. They can't be blocked. Draw a bunch of cards off Tovolar. Familiar Ground, I really wish I was able to play that this game. This is one of the cards that I know a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, that's a cool card.
It's a really, really powerful card if you build your deck in a certain way. This has won me more games than I can remember with when I play as Tovolar. And then Augur of Autumn. I love this card. If you don't do this, you need to start doing this, okay? So Augur of Autumn says you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands from the top card of your library. And then it says as long as you control 3 or more creatures with different power, you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. The main thing is you may look at the top card of your library at any time. So what I love to do with this is whenever somebody does anything, plays a spell, draws a card, moves to a phase, whatever, in response, I'm going to look at the top card of my library. Okay, continue.
I don't think it has ever mattered.
No, never once. But I just love it. It makes me happy to see the annoyed look on people's faces when I check the top card of my library 5 times in one turn and it's the same card.
It matters this time because I did see that you have Terramorphic Expanse on top. So.
Oh shoot! What do I do?
So a couple of my favorite cards I didn't get to play. 2 cards are just that are just kind of annoying. Esper Sentinel and Draenith Magistrate. Esper Sentinel. It's just fun to ask if people want to pay the 1. And then, in this format, if Esper Sentinel even draws me 1 or 2 cards, I feel happy with it. And then Draenith Magistrates, I just feel like it's just good. I feel like if you're just playing a white in a format like Commander, you just need to be playing it. Sometimes it's better than this, but at the floor, it keeps people from being able to cast their commanders, which is really cool.
It's anti-Muldrotha.
Yeah, and it is anti-Muldrotha too, that is true. And then 2 cards that I play strictly for value. Tetsuko, Umezawa Fugitive, sure. It's a 1/3 human rogue legendary creature. Creatures I control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked, which in this deck means that almost everything in my deck can't be blocked. There's like my commander doesn't apply to, and then there's a couple other cards, but for the most part, almost all my creatures in the deck just all of a sudden are unblockable. And then a really fun card that I've never got to play in paper, but I got to play on Arena when it was in Standard a lot, was Scoots Worm for 2 and a green as a 1/1 insect with landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under my control, I create a 1/1 green insect creature token, and if I have 6 or more lands, I create a token that's a copy of Scoots Worm. So anyone who is familiar with Scoots Worm knows that snowballs really, really fast, and you just get a ton of tokens. So it's really easy that, especially if you already have 6 or more lands and then you start doing the Scoots Worm, then it's going to flood really easy. And then it doesn't matter that they're only 1/1s. You're going to have so many creatures that it's going to be hard for your opponents to do anything about it.
These are 2 of the most disgusting creatures I've ever seen. Esper Sentinel is good.
It's fair.
But I've played Esper Sentinel before, where like it'll be on the table for 5 turns, and I'll draw 2 cards.
Yeah,
I've had that happen before.
Yeah, I've turned 1 Esper Sentinel and draw 2 cards with it, so like it doesn't matter. Like it's pretty fair. Like there are situations where it draws you a ton of cards, but there are just as many games where you might draw nothing.
Yeah,
but
the fact that it's only once a turn is fine.
Yeah, for sure. And then Steven, what are a couple of your favorite cards you didn't get to play?
I think a couple of them would be Fireka, God of Affliction, for 1 a green and a black, 5/5 indestructible, legendary enchantment creature god. As long as your devotion to black and green is less than 7, Fireka isn't a creature. You can pay a black and a green to exile target creature card from a graveyard. Its owner puts a 1/1 black and green snake enchantment creature token with death touch onto the battlefield. Another one is Tremeret, Chosen from Death. It's a legendary enchantment creature demigod. Its toughness is equal to your devotion to black. For 1 and a black, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards, so any graveyard, which is nice. And you gain 1 life for each creature card exiled this way. And then the other one would be Weaver of Harmony for 1 and a green, 2/2 enchantment creature, Snake Druid. Other enchantment creatures you control get +1/+1. You can pay green and tap him to copy target activated or triggered ability you control from an enchantment source. You may choose new targets for the copy.
What is everyone's favorite deck at the table? Is it your own? Did someone else have a really sweet deck? Preston, why don't you start us off?
I do love my Animar deck, but I think it does work a lot better as the Commander version with the big old Eldrazi. So I think my favorite might be Steven's. I also
Because
built
you
that
built
deck.
that, yeah.
But it's so cool.
It is very cool.
What about you, Jason?
I like your deck a lot.
Really?
I like tokens. Tokens is probably my favorite strategy. And so the fact that even in a deck like this, you were able to generate a massive amount of tokens on your turns. I love tokens. I love the things that you can do with tokens, all the tricks that you can get into. So yeah, I gotta say yours. Plus, I love that white is a really viable color now. Over the past couple of years, we've gotten a lot of really good white cards that have just changed the whole, the way that, at least I think, changed the way that the community has viewed that color.
Well, I think in Tiny Leaders, white was always good. I think white and black were the 2 best colors in Tiny Leaders back when it was popular. Which is one of the reasons I chose Animar.
I think my Commander's deceptive in this fact that it is also green and blue. And in Commander, sure, green and blue are probably better than white. But I feel like even if, I don't know, I feel like a lot of, and maybe it's in the context of Tiny Leaders and not full-on Commander, but I think a lot of the better cards in the deck are white cards. So yeah, I agree with you. But I also agree with Preston that I think my favorite deck at the table is Steven's deck. I kind of was saying this back when he played that deck on the Christmas episode. It's so powerful. He can't really keep much of a board at any one time because he's sacrificing so many of his permanents, including his lands and stuff like that.
But that's 12 life every turn.
Exactly. Yeah, and he's gaining life. He's drawing a bunch of cards. He's always gonna have a fistful of cards. So if he is able to ramp and make up for those lands he's sacrificing, or get enough ahead that he can start chaining multiple spells together in a turn, I do think that it's obviously way weaker as a Tiny Leaders deck. I feel like it's harder for you to play that catch up. But I mean, you did so much damage.
Yeah,
this
did you
game.
see how much damage I did?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the
if you
exact
saw how
number
much
is, but it was
damage
a
I
lot.
did the first game, I mean, I almost
Yeah, so if you haven't seen episode
Yeah.
5, go watch that. He played this for the Christmas special as a full commander deck. I haven't had a Golgari deck in a long time, like just strictly Golgari, but this is a really interesting deck. But Steven, what about you? But Preston, I do like your version of Animar. Like normally when I've seen Animar decks, it's mostly just
still
generic
colored creatures.
just generic big creatures. But then like specifically being like I'm going to specifically play colorless creatures so I can keep chaining them together. That's a really interesting thing that I don't think I've ever played against before. So
You know what I see a lot when I play against Animar decks? I see a lot of Anamorph.
yeah,
You know, where people just have a bunch of morph cards in their deck.
that is
Either that or, like you said a second ago, Eldrazi.
yeah.
Yeah.
I do have those in my commander version,
Yeah.
but
What about you, Steven? Did you have a favorite deck?
Well, part of the reason why I like my deck so much is because it's very different from what I usually play. But I might still have to pick Tovolar because we love
You've just
wolves.
loved it for
we
so
just
long.
we just love wolves and werewolves. Wolves and werewolves were the first really the first decks I started to build ever when I started playing Magic.
and they weren't even good then.
yeah,
No.
they weren't even good then. Now they're
That's
actually good.
pre-Tovolar.
Yeah, this is pre-Tovolar.
Wait, Steven, you ready?
Okay.
Anyways, so and it does kind of suck to see that he didn't really pop off because I didn't do justice for Tovolar during Tribal Week, and you didn't do justice for this week.
People have
and-
seen it go off. It's not like they're not believing in Tovolar.
And
Yeah,
if you
and
haven't seen
check out-
Tovolar go off,
Actually, you can
promise
just
you it
watch
can.
episode 0. Actually,
Yeah,
never
watch
mind.
episode 0 of our show. Steven,
I
won the
did-
game
I did
and he was
win.
playing Tovolar.
Oh, you
I-
did?
I-
Then what
yeah.
are you talking about? You didn't do it justice.
Well,
Well,
that was
on
episode
Tribal
0.
Week on episode 3 on episode 3 of
Oh,
the
I
show.
did
Tribal
nothing
Week.
that whole game.
Steven basically did nothing.
Oh, none of us did nothing because Morgan won almost instantly.
You did
Beautiful.
you did more than Tom.
It was beautiful, was it?
At the time of recording this is our.
He casted his 6-mana Dragon Commander on turn 3.
Beautiful.
It was
No,
awesome.
it was horrifying.
It was the shortest game I think as far as
Yeah,
turns
no,
go.
it is.
At
Yeah.
the time that this comes
And
out, that might
time.
not be true anymore because the Voltron game was also pretty short. My last question I have for the table this week is I think at this point we will for sure do a season 2 just because we already have other ideas we want to do. But past that, I'm not sure. But when we're figuring out what games we're going to do for season 2, is Tiny Leader something you guys would like to do again, or do you just want to stick strictly to actual Commander? Maybe try another variant. What are you guys kind of thinking as far as bringing this or a similar theme back for next season?
I'm down.
I
already have another Tiny Leaders deck I could play instead.
See, I would like to do it again because it would be nice to build a deck that is solely a Tiny Leaders deck instead
Right.
of just taking apart a deck that I have that's a Commander deck. And it would be nice to actually build a Tiny Leaders deck.
I have another Tiny Leaders deck. It's Baral as the commander, so mono blue, counterspell, tribal basically, and it has no win con. It's amazing.
So it's just nobody has fun but you.
Yeah, so I just have to hope my opponents mill out before I do. Yeah, that's the point of the deck. It's hilarious.
So
What
tune
about-
into that episode when Morgan makes everyone feel bad.
I don't know. I probably won't play that. If we do Tiny Leaders, I'll probably do something different. But Steven, what about you?
I definitely like to do Tiny Leaders again. I could do the same thing that you did with my Tovar deck, or I could just make another deck just completely from scratch. There is, and I think I've mentioned this perhaps once or twice before, but I've been wanting to make a Golgari Squirrel deck, Squirrel Tribal deck. It's on my list of stuff to do, but I'm kind of broke, so
Yes, playing this game is kind of hard when you're broke.
yeah.
Any closing thoughts on this episode?
Tiny
Tovolar-
Leaders is cool, and I hope we gave it some love and maybe got some other people interested in it.
It might not be on camera, but Tovolar will have his revenge.
Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know why you would have, but if you somehow sat through this video and haven't checked out the game that we're talking about, go do that. And then tune back in next week for the next episode. I believe the next episode after this one will be Budget Week. We're all playing $50 decks. That's a fun one, so tune in for that. And we will see you guys later.
Bye.